to Cash Up, ladies and gentlemen, a weekly show where we converse with amazing folks in DFIR. And today I'm so excited to have the privilege as a guest host on Cash Up to be joined by the one and only Jessica Hyde. Jessica is Director of Forensics at Magnet and a Professor of Mobile Device Forensics at George Mason University. She's an active member on about a dozen industry advisory boards and associations, including HTCIA, DFRWS, SANS. In addition, Jessica's research and contributions to digital forensics reach far and wide. Her influence was vividly illustrated by her recent inclusion in the Forensic Forecast Awards, where she was nominated by industry peers such as you and me for Mentor and Social Media Contributor of the Year. As if she wasn't busy enough, Jessica also presents at events all over the world. Not only are her talks revered for the substance of the content, but if you've ever sat for one of Jessica's talks, they also are known for the passion with which she gives them. She's often requested by name to present, which is a testament of her reputation. Her Twitter account is chock full of digital forensics information and a popular resource for examiners all over the world. And her handle, Bin2Hex, makes all of us in the field feel like we're part of the inside joke. With so many incredible achievements and accolades, it's impossible to adequately introduce Jessica. She is one of the most respected contributors, mentors, investigators, colleagues, and friends in our field, and that is why today is so special. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming the one and the only Jessica Hyde. Welcome.
Thank you, Lynn. That was way too gracious. And Lynn, thank you so much for doing the swap. I know that our original scheduled guest had a complication and couldn't make it today. So thank you so much for suggesting this idea without even knowing that that was the situation. And so thank you so much for doing this. And I look forward to the reversal of this where I interview you, I believe we're November 24th, right, if I remember correctly. Yeah. So.
Well, how does it feel to be on the other side of the screen?
Actually, way more nervous than it does to be on your side. So now I feel like I'm getting my just desserts.
Oh, no. This is going to be exciting. I think so. It just makes sense. Your show where you're taking forensicators from around the field and you're humanizing them. So I got to see Brett Shavers in human form, whereas normally I see him as Brett Shavers or Tara.
It sounds like normally you see him as like a gecko or something.
Well, on Twitter, he's just this, right. So smart. Just, right. And like you are also in the field, you're well-known, well-respected. Everybody knows who you are as a forensicator. So today we get to see who's Jessica. Who is Jessica Hyde? Okay. So
I don't know if you've ever heard of this show called Utopia. So there's a show called Utopia in the UK, and there's a character on it called Jessica Hyde. And I'll tell a quick funny story, which is the first time I sent a submission to speak at SANS DFIR Summit, they want a video of you having presented, and I didn't have any videos of me having presented. But Utopia, it's this British show, and this woman, Jessica Hyde, is really kick butt, and there's like all these torture scenes and everything else. And so anyway, there was a video montage of Where is Jessica Hyde? And so I took that video montage off of YouTube and submitted that as a video. And it was like this guy like torturing people trying to find out where is and who is Jessica Hyde. And then she shows up and she's like, I am Jessica Hyde and I'm here to kill you. And I got accepted, but I think they knew that wasn't me presenting forensics.
Hopefully they were able to make the distinction. That's good. So who is Jessica Hyde and how have you, the mom, the woman, the wife, how have you been doing during this great COVID-19 quarantine? How has Jessica been?
Well, that's a really good question. I mean, I feel very fortunate. For me, I do a lot of extensive travel, and I have, for the entirety of my duration, I mean, when I married my husband, I was in the Marine Corps. So I've done a lot of travel my entire career. And right now I've been home with my 2 boys and my husband, and we haven't much left, and it has been amazing. To be honest, I didn't know if my marriage would do well when we see each other all the time. I kind of
I've heard that a lot.
Well, I kind of contributed that maybe things were so good for each other because we both were very, very busy professionals who had our own lives as well as our relationship, and that we had lots of professional respect for each other and support for each other. And so I always thought that that was part of our strength. And now, so my last time I left my local vicinity was late February. I did for HTCIA, for Mobile Day at HTCIA in New York City. And I was there with Alexis Brignoni and Sarah Edwards and Heather Mahalik and Warren Cruz, and just amazing group of people. And that was the last time I traveled. So I've been home since the end of February.
And everyone's still alive.
Everyone's still alive, and I have a better relationship with my kids. I have a better relationship with my husband. We play a lot of board games. We camp a lot, and it's just been wonderful. Now, I also want to say I totally recognize that for a lot of people, that this is an extremely stressful time. Not everyone is lucky to be in healthy relationships. Not everyone is fortunate enough to have people with them, and some people are in total isolation. Not everyone is fortunate enough to have a dedicated office space where I can be and hang up a little sign on my door that tells my kids not to come in. And so it's Cards Against Humanity is not family fun, Jason. That's a little bit of an adult game. I do own the game. I do play with adults. I don't play with my teenage children. That would be not good. We do play apples to apples. So.
Although they might win. Teenage children, I tell you what. They might win.
Teenage children, yes. So it's been, for my family, it's been very good. Do I absolutely miss getting to see my friends, getting to see the people I love in this industry? Absolutely.
Of course, right.
But, you know, I try to look at the good side in everything. I mean, I've done stupid stuff. I've torn my ACL during COVID. Who does that, right?
With all those activities.
Well, yeah, it's actually playing with my kids, right? Mm-hmm. Like, so actually being a little more active and now less, but they totally would win. So yeah, it's going.
I like that. I'm glad because, like you said, there's the other side, that dark side. So I'm glad that it's working well, and I love that you said you and your marriage is better because of it. Because one of the questions I want to ask is, who is the other half of you?
Oh, sure.
How did you meet? What does he do?
Yeah. So my other half is Matt Hyde. He goes by Weird at First on Twitter, but he doesn't tweet much. Today he's a pen tester. He builds Hack the Boxes. He participates in those. So he's an OSCP red team type. He probably would say yin and yang. But we actually both met in the Marine Corps, fixing jets. He was my collateral duty inspector on the person who inspected my work on the first aircraft I ever fixed in the Marine Corps. I was really, really simple first assignment. I was changing a battery on a Harrier. And
totally simple. Yeah.
Totally, it actually is. It's a 24-volt battery. It's big and pink. Weighs probably about 45 pounds. So I put it in, and you have to torque the bolts. And he was going to inspect my torques. And it sounds silly, but I torqued my bolts. I knew how torque wrench worked. And I was like, how do you check somebody else's torques? So I said to him, hey, Corporal Hyde, which is who he was at the time, can I see you check the torques? And so the battery goes in this compartment in the bottom of a Harrier called the hellhole. And so this is my first day in the lab. By the way, I'm the only female in the shop, wrong term. I'm the only female in my shop. And so he gets in there and he shows me how he verifies the torques, tells me it's good to go, and tells me to go ahead and safety wire my bolts. I safety wire my bolts. He goes back into the shop. The master gunnery sergeant pulls him into the back and tells him, or asks him why he got into the compartment with me, that it was inappropriate and that he was risking a sexual harassment suit. And he said, because she's a Marine and I was teaching her how to do her job. And so
Nice.
Matt and I actually became friends and were coworkers for several years. We didn't start dating till he got out of the Marine Corps, and he stayed and became the Boeing rep for the aircraft. And so, yeah, so he got out, studied network security, became a network engineer, and worked in government while I was working government contracting. There were periods where we lived apart. There were periods where I deployed, the whole nine. And now he does what he does in his office right upstairs, and from me doing what I do in his office downstairs. But I would say we probably have more test networks in our house and more computers than most people. If anyone was ever to try to serve a warrant and forensicate this house, I'd feel really, really bad for them.
Yeah, that'd be a long day.
It would be more than a long day. There is more.
But I bet it's not dirty. At least there would be that. The people showing up at your house, it's not going to be filthy. It's not.
No. My house is actually.
It probably smells good too.
Very, very nice and organized. It does smell nice. I have lavender essential oils when you enter. But but they'd be like, why are there bins of about 250 phones, and why are there 25 computers in this room, and why are there 8 live networks in this house? But it's because we're always setting up test networks. We have the kids on separate segmented networks for school that have specific shut off and on times.
Of course you do.
Well, yeah. And we have rules about, like, he can't hack on my test networks that I'm using for, like, we have to have rules and boundaries for each other's spaces.
You guys have policies and procedures.
we kind of do, yeah. I'd say we have a household SOP. And it's funny because when we used to fix jets, like, there would be like a jet with a really big problem, and because we were married, so he came back to the squadron as a civilian, and because we were married, we were required to work opposite shifts because we worked in the same shop. So he would work days and I'd work overnights, but we'd work the same gripe. So, like, I remember there being jets that were hard down for, like, weird things. And so we would be troubleshooting the same jet. And it's much like we do in forensics, contemporaneous notes, so that the next person who took over your aircraft would read your notes on what you were doing and then pick up and continue the maintenance. It's a lot of troubleshooting and testing to figure out what was wrong. So a lot of those skills completely translate to the work we do today. But I would say our dinner conversations differ because we used to, like, at dinner on the weekends when maybe we weren't at work, I'd be like, hey, what about wire 115 on cannon plug J105 to the FPA? And, like, we'd have these detailed conversations. But now our conversations are completely much more on InfoSec related, because I'll be like, hey, so I'm looking into the app Wire, blah, blah, and we'll start, like, talking about that. So it's very different.
So you live, eat, breathe, sleep computers. Your household, your kids, your husband, your family. So thinking back, what is the very first memory of a computer that you recall?
Easy. I was about 4 years old. We didn't have it. My uncle had a C64, and I started learning to program in BASIC. And my first program was spelling out words from phone numbers, so my childhood phone number was 201-743-7378. Yes, I know that to this day, but I mainly know it because 743-7378 on a phone pad will be she pest, P-E-S-T, which maybe I feel like I've epitomized that in my life. But that was the first program I wrote, was to convert phone numbers to this massive list of all the possible alphanumeric combinations. And, you know, how telling is that I wound up working in mobile forensics labs later, and also just, like, you know, retrospectively, my love of pattern recognition. And so.
And now you're teaching it at George Mason. You teach it. How old were you when you were writing these programs?
So I started at 4, and I'm going to be really clear that I am not a developer and I don't code day to day anymore.
But at 4 years old.
I learned at 4 years old is when I was taught how to code in BASIC on C64, and I loved it. Used to hook it up to the TV, and I mean, it was just so much fun figuring out how you could make things, and
Right, because I'm thinking back to what I'm considering to be a normal childhood. Like, where in the world is Carmen Sandiego with those big 5.5, 5.25 inch floppies? Right?
Absolutely.
that's a normal, like that's maybe the first time that most kids are introduced to computers.
But how do I build Carmen Sandiego? How do I make Carmen Sandiego? How do I find out where in the world Carmen Sandiego is by trying to figure out where she's stored in the game as opposed to answering the questions? Right? That's
the way you think. Right. Okay. So
Jason, I that wasn't the solution back then.
Way back then. When you used to flop those big, and I remember we in the classroom we had an entire table, and everybody would get those big floppies, and that was my first. So to hear you say that you were pattern recognizing and that you remember your phone number and that and you still remember ShePest because you programmed it, I did.
By the way, ShePest can also be She Rest, but I resonated more with ShePest.
Why not? Because it could be. Why not? Why not? Why not? So you're programming at 4. You've got all of the way that your mind is thinking. How did you know then? So now you are a mobile forensics instructor at professor at George Mason. You do mobile forensics. How did you know that this is what you wanted to be when you grew up? Did you know then?
No, I didn't. I absolutely didn't. I was a lost child, a lost cause. I actually recently did a really in-depth podcast interview that will be airing soon with another organization. I'll share that once it airs, where I really did describe my origin story, and I'll give you the little teaser that I may teach graduate school now and have a master's degree, but I was a high school dropout. And I'll save my origin story for that, but I'll kind of tell you a little bit more about how I got here. A radioactive spider bit her, according to Jason. So here at Magnet Forensics, like, how did I get to where I am? I was working in a forensics lab that I completely wound up there by accident. I was actually in a reverse engineering lab and wound up reverse engineering microcontrollers of unknown origin that were part of improvised explosive devices. This is after I got out of the Marine Corps and had an engineering degree. And from there, started doing mobile forensics and being part of the digital forensics team there. While I was there and part of the digital forensics team, it must have been 2010 or 2011, got our first copy of JAD software of IEF. And at the time,
everybody's like, oh, yeah.
I was a government contractor on a contract under ATF, so it was an ATF license. And I think it was even free at the time. And I was like, oh, this is so cool. This is saving me time. Doing these internet searches. This is really, really cool. Oh, I'm so thankful to the magical, mystical Jad in Canada who developed this and is saving me time. But a lot of what I did was blown up mobile. So I really was only using that when I happened to get a hard disk, get in a computer drive. And so, it was really cool and I had that exposure. And then I went over and left that government contracting and went into consultancy and worked at EY, which was great. And it was so good for me to have exposure to more of the consultancy, IR types of cases that I didn't get in government contracting. And when I went there, my love of IEF changed. And this is probably the time where the director of magnetic forensics talks about how mad she was at a product. But listen, get it, Jed, please don't fire me. So
it has a good ending. The story ends well.
The story has a good ending, right? So the problem is every once in a while I'd have a case where I would, really quickly have the image and I'd run IEF and I'd produce a preliminary report very, very quickly, just highlighting some IEF results with my whole plan of what I wanted to do to dig deeper. And oftentimes on those cases where IEF results were showing enough, I didn't get to work that further plan. And I'd be told, Jessica, your hours on that case are done. Go ahead and close it up. And it's more because time was money, and those results were enough for whatever organization it was to be able to come to an agreement. It's be able to say, hey, this isn't wrongful termination, whatever the situation was in that case. I mean, there definitely were cases where I got to investigate deeper, but oftentimes those IEF results would like stab me because I wanted to be doing like deep dive work. so it was sometimes just gave me results too quickly, and I didn't have to do some of the hard religion. It was too good. So then I went back into government contracting, and I was working on a mobile forensics team. And I got to do incredible work there. Like, it was the best job on earth. And one time I had a phone, and it was for a really important case. And I knew how to get into this phone manually, but it was not supported by any of the commercial tools. And I had all the commercial tools at the time. At the time, I also happened to be a beta tester for Magnet Acquire when it was first released. So I'm a beta tester for Magnet Acquire. And one of the cool things was that the logs were really robust, so I knew what it was doing. And so I had this phone in evidence, no commercial tools supported. And I was like, hey, I know how to get into this phone manually. I know what route I can use. I can get a full physical. You know, I did the right thing because I couldn't do it directly on the evidence. I ordered exemplars of the device, proved my process, wrote up the document, gave it to the case agent, said, hey, can I do this to the device? Here's my exemplar. I know it works. And they said, this is going to trial. This is a really big case. We don't want you to do that thing. We want you to use a tool. So I was like, you know what? I actually think Acquire will actually apply the same route I'm using. So I went to one of my test devices, and it was in beta, and I tested it, and it worked. And it had really robust logs. So I went back to the case agent and said, look, this tool is in beta. It's not released yet. I'm a beta tester. I can prove that it does the thing, but it's a tool doing it, not me. Can I use this? And I said, the logs are robust, and I showed them, and they said yes, and I did it. And we were able to get into that device, and that device was major in the case. So a couple of days later, I was at Techno Myrtle Beach. I don't remember if it was Mobile Device Forensic World at that time or if it was Techno Security. It was right around when the time changed. The year Acquire was released. And I went over to the Magnet booth. And Jeff McGillivray was there, and I don't know if he remembers this. And I went over to him, and I was like, he's the VP of product at Magnet. And I was like, thank you so much. You don't know how much your tool just saved me on a major case. Thank you so much for building Acquire. Thanks so much for letting me beta test it. I can't tell you anything about it, but it worked.
Thank you.
And so that was my first time, like, actually meeting with Magnet folks, and it was really expressing my gratitude because it was a really incredibly important case, and it allowed us to get the evidence. So then a couple years later, I'm working in that same lab. And like I said, we were beta testers for Magnet products as well as other commercial tool vendors. And Magnet actually had sent down a cotillion of people to come back down and talk to us and hear what we had to say about forensics. So several of the govies I worked with and a couple of the contractors, we had this meeting, and I'll never forget it. GMAC, or Jeff McGillivray, our VP of product, was there. Jad was there. Jed Sliba, our CTO and founder, Adam Belcher, our CEO, Craig Guyman, who is the director of solution consultants, who Lynn works with.
He's my boss.
Actually, funny story, at the time, both of our kids were doing Taekwondo together. So when I showed up into that meeting, it was the first time I had met him, and I recognized him from my kids' dojo. Our kids were in the same after-school program at the time. Yeah, so it's a really small world. This is years and years and years ago. We both have many black belt children. So we both have two children who are both black belts in Taekwondo. That's awesome. So I met with all of these incredible people, and they were getting our opinions on future products. They were asking for our feedback. For those people who want to talk about it, so this is Axiom was in beta. So this is before it got released, because I believe it got released in May of 2016. So this is before that. And so Axiom's in beta, and we were beta testers at the time for Axiom. So we were giving feedback on Axiom. And funnily enough, because it doesn't exist till now, they started talking about the concept for Automate. And I remember I got up and went up to the board and started whiteboarding. So I thought they must have thought I was crazy.
I love that. You're just like, no, here, let me take this. I got this. I love this. Okay. And they're all watching. Okay.
So yeah, and so it was just this really cool moment. And I was just like so impressed by everything they were talking about, and mostly by the fact that they were listening to forensics examiners, right? Mm-hmm. That they were there, and their reason for being there was they were getting our feedback on what we thought of Axiom pre-release. It was under a different name then, like its pre-release name. I think I'm allowed to say it. So it was called Rome, and they used to have all these stickers. When I first came to Magnet, it said Rome wasn't built in a day. So if you ever see a Magnet developer who has that sticker on their laptop, it means that they were there before Axiom was released, and they were working on Rome. Yeah, they're an OG. So Rome wasn't built in a day. So that was the name of it at that time. And yeah, it was really, really awesome that they were getting our feedback. By the way, in that first meeting, not me, but one of my colleagues did ask for a dark theme, and I know it still doesn't exist today, and I feel like this is a moment to remind Jad right now that a dark theme would be awesome.
Are you listening?
Especially for people who do forensics outdoors and have glare issues, which was the reason for the request. But so just so you know, even working at Magnet, not all your requests get
there are so many
for dark theme. We're getting a dark theme 100% in the chat. Thanks you, Jason. So
yes.
So it was, I felt like amazed by it. And I remember, so they leave, and I remember one of my colleagues turned around and said, Jessica, it feels like you work for them. And I don't think anybody at Magnet knows this story. And I was like, that's funny. That's funny. To my colleague who was one of the govies. He's like, no, like you just seem to have like this relationship with them, like you had known them all. And I'm like, no, a couple years ago, I said something to Jeff at Techno, and I've seen Jad speak before, but that's about it. So anyway, my lab was being BRAC'd, base realignment and closure. So my lab was being moved, and where it was being moved to wasn't geographically feasible for my personal life, because my husband was commuting into the city for his work, and the commute time for me to where the lab was moving would have been in excess of probably about an hour and a half. And with the hours that after school and before school programs worked, it was not a feasible move for me. At the time, I worked for Basis Technology, by the way. I worked for the one and only Brian Carrier. That was incredible. So I was a forensic consultant. I didn't work on autopsy, but yes. So I feel like I'm the luckiest woman in the world, because I have gotten to work with some of the most amazing people in forensics. So I worked with Heather Mahalik. Heather and I worked together there. Heather actually hired me to replace her as she moved into a different role on that team. And I got to work for Brian, and I got to work these amazing cases and meet these amazing people. And Tara and I worked together actually there for a brief period, et cetera. Like, I just feel like I've had the luckiest, most amazing career on earth in the incredible forensicators that I've got to work with and solve cases with and do research with. I just incredibly blessed, lucky, whatever you believe in. So then my lab was bracking, and so it's like, oh, I got to figure something out. So I let Brian know, hey, Brian, like, just so you know, I'm not going to be able to stay here. And Magnet had an opening, and I sent him my resume, and they scheduled for me to do an interview with them. Now, I didn't want to necessarily say where I was interviewing or anything. And for one reason or another, it made the most sense for me to conduct the interview at CEIC, which was the guidance conference at the time, Computer Enterprise and Investigations Conference. I was speaking there with Cesar Quezada. We were doing a talk on parsing unsupported apps in mobile forensics, which I feel like is a talk I've reinvented a million times.
But you have to, because it keeps changing.
It keeps changing, and there's still testing methodology and everything else. So Cesar and I were giving that talk, and we planned to have an interview there with a bunch of folks at Magnet. I had done Magnet, by the way. If you ever do work for Magnet Forensics, I will say, if there's one thing we're known for, it is a very long, extensive interview process.
I can attest.
With everyone. everyone. So I'd already done a
Yes.
series of phone interviews, etc. But we were going to meet in person, several different interviews at CEIC. But this is the year that Magnet got disinvited from the conference for releasing Axiom. And so Magnet Axiom was released in April or May. I don't remember the exact date. I apologize, of 2016. And I started in July 2016. So I've been here just over 4 years. And in May at the conference, I was supposed to interview. They were disinvited. They had their first Magnet user summit that they pulled off in like no time flat. Kudos to Roz and the entire marketing team at Magnet for doing it. It was great. Actually, Heather, my husband, because Matt also being in a like industry went to it. His lab at the time used Magnet products. So my husband, myself, and Heather actually all went to that user summit together. And then went to CEIC, and I actually did my interviews at Caesar's Palace with Jad and Adam, with Jamie McQuaid, and with a whole bunch of folks from Magnet there. And so, yeah, it's kind of funny that's where I interviewed, and then they, because literally like in the bars that weren't closed because it was the middle of the day in Caesar's Palace.
From Magnet.
They weren't allowed to go to. I remember when I first met Jamie McQuaid, I said it was really cool to meet The Voice because like I had heard so many of his talkovers on IEF videos.
That's how I feel about Tara and Trey too. Yeah.
Right. And at the time, they were like all Jamie McQuaid videos because he was the only one doing it at that time. So it's like, it's so cool to actually meet the person behind the voice. And everybody was amazing. Scott, who is our chief strategy officer, like everybody who I met was incredible. Roz, everybody. So met with everybody. It was amazing. They created this role, director of forensics here at Magnet. And it has changed dramatically because when I first came here, it was Jad, Jamie, I, and a couple of trainers in terms of the examiners. And now there's 26 of us. I mean, we have a whole examiner page. It's just so amazing how Magnet's grown. And now I get to work with all these incredible examiners. So there you go. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Well, the question was, there were 3 questions in the question and you answered all 3 of them. And the one thing that just kept sticking out was all the times when you talk about how grateful you are and how you reflect on all of these really great minds and these really great personalities that you've worked with. We're all saying that about you too. So it's another reflection, it's another illustration of your humility and just how there are so many wonderful people in this field. But Heather, I mean, I started after her, but at the State Department, I was at State Department 6 and she was there. And so we share one of my best friends in the whole world is one of her best friends in the whole world. So it's the small community, we all know each other, and your reputation speaks louder than anything else. And you're here, and
that is something though that's worth reminding everyone, right? Because the people you meet,
yes,
you're all going to grow in the industry together, and you're all going to know each other, and it is a small field. And you are going to meet each other over and over and over again. There is more than one person who I've worked with in multiple labs at different points in my career. Some who I had somebody who I hired them 3 times. I worked with them 3 different times, and it was because they were amazing, but also just because they came. I never went out and asked them to come join me where I was. They just happened to, at that time, want to come to locations where I was. But there are multiple people who I've worked with multiple times over my career in different capacities and different roles and different functions. And you never know who you're going to see again. So treat everyone kindly.
Yes.
And respect everyone's gifts and credit everyone who does all of the amazing work that is your foundations. And it's an amazing community. There are just so many brilliant people.
There are. And there are so many great things that these people are working on. And it just we could talk forever about that. But of these things that people work on, of these great people, these great minds, we're all working on something all the time. Mm-hmm. What is something you are working on that has you excited?
Okay, so I am working on a gazillion things, it feels like, all the time. So I'm always excited by the multitude of projects I have. So I'll talk about a variety of things, I guess. So I cannot tell you how excited I am about DFIR review. I know that we have a whole bunch of articles that are completing the publishing process this week. We just had our meeting last week, and DFIR review started now a year and a half ago to review blog posts to help them be prepared for court. And I am so stoked about that project, and it means so much. And I get to collaborate with great people on that project, including Brett Shavers, Joe Walsh, Joe Silva, BBT, Black Bag Technologies. I don't know why I speak in acronyms. It must be the Marine Corps.
It's forensics. It's DFIR.
It's both, right? But I really get to collaborate. Owen Casey, who is incredible and one of the most amazing mentors, and I get to collaborate with him on several projects, and I feel so freaking fortunate for that. But really, we're bringing all this content through Holger Morgenstern, Graham Horsman, Eleanor. I don't want to butcher your last name, Eleanor, but Eleanor is amazing. She's at a University of Lausanne. Just incredible people who I get to work with globally on this project. Joshua Hickman has been integral in now moving from being a publisher to a reviewer, and that's all part of DFRWS. So DFIR Review is a sub-segment of DFRWS, and DFRWS is focused more on academic paper research and publishing all across the world, EU, US, and I've gotten that just wrapped down, finishing the conference, and I'm one of the members of the organizing committee there, and just incredible, brilliant, smart people I get to work with there. Everyone from Daryl Fife and Josiah Dijkstra and Bradley Schatz and Elizabeth, and I don't want to butcher Elizabeth's last name either. So when I think I'm going to butcher somebody's last name, I won't say it. But just I get to work with the most incredible people when I volunteer and do that. So I love that. But so DFIR Review has been a bit of a passion project. Talking a little bit more on the technical side, what I literally was working on last night and this morning was on Saturday. I got a smart fridge. But it actually doesn't fit in my kitchen. The dimensions that they said they had and dimensions that it is actually don't work. And so it's getting picked up and returned tomorrow. So I've been populating data on it and 3 devices, a Pixel, a Samsung, and an iPhone with the Family Hub 2.0 and trying to produce as much data as I possibly can before I rip it. It's running Tizen, and because I'm returning it, I'm actually going back and forth in my mind right now as if I'm going to root it. But at any rate, neither here nor there. So that is what I'm 100% working on, like right this second. Still working on Google Chromebook research. I
have a question about that.
Okay.
Google Chromebook.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. This one's personal. This is a selfish question.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of years ago, it was a year ago, you were talking about a personal project, a passion project that you were working on with the Google Chromebook because it belonged to your grandmother. And the way that I'm very close, or was very close to my grandmother. She is the most influential woman in my life, or was. And the way you spoke of your grandmother, it was like this kindred bond that I had. And at that point in time when you were giving the talk, you were not able to get into the Chromebook. So it's sort of been like this movie that I haven't seen the end to. So how does the movie end? Did you get into the Chromebook? Did you get her? How does it end?
So the movie isn't over yet because I still don't have the data off the book. But I guess I'll give a little bit of preface to this. So I will say a lot of people have asked a lot of questions about Chromebooks, and Jad and I did some research into Chromebook storage, and I'm sorry, I'm giggling because I just saw Brett's and no other salesy people read their fridge. It's Tizen. I've rooted Tizen before. I have the Tizen SDK. It's really okay. But I'm just not sure if it's a smart thing for me to do if I'm going to return it, because it was not a cheap fridge, and if I'm going to get my money back because it doesn't fit in my kitchen, I want my money back. So, gosh, I don't know. Now I'm torn. I actually did contemplate putting it in my dining room. So I actually have that Chromebook because I've been doing so much Chromebook research. I have them. So this is my grandmother's Chromebook. And my grandmother died unexpectedly, and she was like a powerhouse. So, I mean, she was a VP of a company in the 1950s when women didn't work, of a pharmaceutical company.
Nice.
My grandmother was always outspoken. She lived larger than life. She worked her butt off.
So now we know where you get it from.
She's probably the one. She had a lot of spunk. Unfortunately, she had diabetes and she had an amputation, but she was one of those people who, like, she was in her 80s and was like, I'm going to walk again. And she was in rehab learning to walk again, like on a prosthetic. That was her process. She was like, I'm going to do it. Like, she was really motivated. But she wanted to write her story, write her autobiography. And man, she was a woman who could write an autobiography. So we got her this Chromebook. And 2012 Chromebook. Old one, probably like $100. Has an SD card slot. Would have been so much easier if she had used the SD card. But she didn't. And for reasons I don't want to get into, I do not have her username and password. The device is not in dev mode. If I know enough that if I put it in dev mode, I will erase it. I've bought the same model. I've taken them apart. I want to make sure that I have a method that's safe before I get into that, because the data integrity there is very, very personal. I want to read this story more than you know.
Yeah.
At any rate, she was an incredible woman. I don't want to spoil her life story. And so, yeah, there's some personal motivation there for me. If you are looking to get into a Chromebook, please check out Daniel Dickerman's Chromebook acquisition paper. Actually, that and all the scripts have gone through the DFIR review process and are on DFIR review. And that's dfir.pubpub.org. And so I'll drop that in the chat, and I have to do it as Magnet Forensics. So sorry for you can't type a URL in as a regular human. So that was me.
I love that you're the guest on this show and you're still helping us.
Oh no, it's just because I know how to drop a link.
It's who you are.
But no, so continuing Chromebook research, but there are so many cases where these are critical. So Daniel Dickerman does have an acquisition method. TLDR on that is you do need the password. If you drop these devices into dev mode, and they aren't already, it will erase them. But I think there's hope. I did a talk about Chromebook acquisition at MVS that I welcome you to check out. Well, it's more on the analysis side. I also just wrote up, because somebody who asked me for it, a quick blog post that will probably go out this week or next week. I don't know when marketing's putting it out. I just sent it to them on Friday with all the locations of interest of Chromebook stuff. It's not exhaustive because I haven't necessarily seen everything there is, but it's definitely a good start if you're doing a Chromebook acquisition. So it's a nice little cheap sheet blog post. It's already been submitted, so I don't know when it'll post.
So driven by passion, but then you're also turning that passion into content for the field. Which is
and there's people who are running into cases with these all the time, right?
All the time, especially with school now.
Yes,
because schools are handing them out.
They're very cheap, and they work. So many schools are using Google Classroom. With the advent of schools going online, I can't even imagine how many Chromebooks are out there now. The last stats I have are from 2019, from before COVID and this mass issuance of Chromebooks to students at home. And students at home now become a different type of target. Yes.
This is the COVID-19 is a whole pre and post, right? It's my daughter keeps saying, my teenager, my oldest, in the beginning she was like, this is our 9/11. This is what we're living through, and she was very excited. Now anymore, she's like, I'm done. I just want to go to school. But the point to that is pre and post. Pre-digital and post-digital in terms of COVID-19, because they're issuing Chromebooks, because we're reliant on the internet. Mm-hmm. And this content that you're producing and that others in the field are producing and sharing, which is what brings it into the next one, sharing that content is crucial. So of all of the content that you're creating, that you're sharing, who is your go-to? What do you go to when you need a resource?
Yeah, great question. So, I mean, there are multiple types of resources that I'm using on a regular basis. So I'm a big believer in what I'm going to call just-in-time forensics. Now, what that is what you find and you produce and you learn about today is what you needed for the case that you worked. If casework is what drives your analysis and your research, you'll always be spot on. You do your research, you share it, you put it out there. Now, the reason you put it out there is it's going to be just in time for forensics for somebody else when they run into that application, when they run into that file system, et cetera. Now, in terms of just-in-time forensics research, right? Like when I'm working on something or I get asked a question or I see a question and I want to know where to go to research it, I am going to tell you I use this site not as it's designed. So This Week in Forensics is designed to give you a blurb every Sunday. Fillmore and Ladrina Sharon's amazing site of what's happened in forensics in the past week. That is not how I use that site. I mean, I do skim through it. I find the articles I want to read, and I read them every Sunday morning. It is required reading. But the one way I use that site is I search for whatever application, file system, et cetera, I'm looking for, because I'm bound to find quick articles there from practitioners. And then likewise, I go to Google Scholar, and I find the articles that are out there from the academia side of the house that are publishing in places like FSI, Digital Investigations Journal, and in DFRWS, et cetera. So, and maybe it's because from being an adjunct and being a practitioner, I kind of straddle both sides of the world, so I pull from both. But really, I use This Week in Forensics as a search. Now, if I'm looking for something and I'm looking for more of a resource, like I'm looking for an SOP, or I'm looking for a keyword list, or I'm looking for a tool that does a specific function, that's a different thing. Then I'm going to go to DFIR.training, to Brett Shaver's site. And I use that extensively, and I give people links to that site extensively. Sometimes I feel like it's the let me Google that for you thing, but it's because they didn't know that thing is on DFIR.training.
Okay.
If I have a question and I want to reach out to the Borg, to the collective mindset of the universe of forensics, I hit the Discord. Okay. I go to the Andrew Rathbun's Discord, and I check there and I look there. If I want to know what's newest and what's happening, I go at #DFIR on Twitter. So these are all things I'm doing every single day. If I want a summary of stuff, I check out about DFIR. So I have like multiple resources I go to, but then to tell you the truth, I still pick up books. So, if I'm digging into a SQLite database and I suddenly have a question, I'm going to pick up Sanderson's SQLite Forensics book, because it's got all those fundamentals and structures there, and it's going to make sure that I understand where this data is coming from. If I have something that's file system architecture and I'm looking at a new file system, believe it or not, I'm going to pick up Carrier's file system analysis, because even though it's talking about older file systems that are probably not what I'm looking at, the understanding and the layout of the structures, it gets me into the right mindset. Yes. So I guess I have like so many resources, and I feel so fortunate to have them at my fingertips, but it goes from those compendium sites like This Week in Forensics, about DFIR, DFIR training, to the people resources that I'm hitting on Discord and Twitter and the community, because I'd say that's where like the hive and the mindset comes together, to like my good old Steadfast, and don't forget Google Scholar. If you guys are not searching on Google to find papers on topics and then get to their abstracts and publication, it really will save you a lot of time if you're looking for actual academic work, and it's going to cull down some of your searches off of what you would just get off of a regular Google search, if that makes sense. Absolutely. So I do search Google Scholar. That's kind of my...
so you go to everything. Google Groups too.
Jason's talking about Google Groups. There are so many listservs. I mean, so yes. I mean, this is something we talk about in the Examiner Guild. So at Magnet Forensics, one of the cool things about all these examiners we have is that my favorite thing we do is every 2 weeks we have an examiner guild. So actually we've got one tomorrow morning. So bi-weekly, all the examiners in the company, including Jad, including Chuck Cobb, anybody who's ever worked as an examiner, he's our VP of training, right? Jamie McQuaid, Chris Vance, Jamie Tubbs, Tara Melton, Trey, everybody who you've ever had teach a class, everybody who works in support who's ever been an examiner, in solution consulting, in product, in engineering, like Mike Williamson, no matter what part, we all get together once every 2 weeks, Jad, of course, and we just talk about forensic things. And we test new products and we play with things and we talk about issues and what we need. We bring in sometimes the product managers so they can hear our points of view on things or issues or artifacts or whatever it is. And it's actually one of my, well, I don't know how you feel about it, Lynn, but it is the coolest thing. And
I agree.
yeah, I would definitely say that's also a resource for me.
It's interactive.
The Examiner Guild and the group of examiners we have. We have a Slack channel internally. So I have like this resource of 20 plus examiners at my fingertips every day who have worked all different kinds of cases and are all over the world, from Singapore to the UK to Germany to the US to Mexico, etc. Of course, Canada. So yeah, I just feel really fortunate to also have that resource.
So you've touched on everything from humans to books to Google websites to social media. So you go to everything. So
and
then what advice? Listservs, everything. So then for somebody trying to get into the field who's looking for, like, on a game board, the start piece, what would you say, what would be your advice to get started? Where would you tell them? Where would you send them?
See, it's a really interesting question because I ask this question every week and everybody gives different answers. And the reason people give different answers is because there's no perfect path.
Right.
And so I think that's the first thing to say to yourself. There's no perfect path. And your path is going to be different if you're 17 and you're applying to college. And so I met somebody who's now studying digital forensics when he was 14 at Circle City Con. His mother brought him to the conference. Amazing person.
Good mom.
Nick Dubois brought him to the conference. I was doing a resume review workshop, Circle City Con, with that Leslie Carhart, Hacks for Pancakes, put on. And so I had volunteered to help. And he comes in and she is like, my son is hacking things. What do I do? And of course, I start talking to him about digital forensics. I spoke with Leslie. Sands was giving out a NetWars Continuous, got him into NetWars Continuous, told him about DFRWS and how he could potentially be a student volunteer and come to the next conference, which was in his region. He did that. I saw him there. I saw him at DEF CON. He submitted a paper to a conference that I was on a review board for. It didn't fit there, but then there was another conference that was geographically close to him that it was a perfect fit for. Suggested to him that he submit to that, so he did his own research. And now in the fall, he's about to start at University of New Haven, where Ibrahim Bagili teaches, and go study digital forensics. But that is because he's a young person. But note, it's not just going to university. He did research and shared his research at 2 conferences. So my number one is there's a hacker. If you've got a 17-year-old, for anybody who's got a teen, if you didn't see it at Sands, next week, August, I think it's 11th and 12th, is doing a summer camp for teens, like a hacking summer camp that's covering all different disciplines. Please put your children in that. I've got my teenage son is going to be doing that next week, and he's excited about it. But the point is that if you're 17 and you can go straight to school, there are plenty of undergraduate programs, Bloomsburg, Davenport. I'm going to forget schools, and I'm going to apologize. Champlain, There are amazing programs with amazing professors, and if you are interested in lists of those, they are on DFIR.training under education. There are amazing programs. Look up the professors, see what research they've done, look them up on Google Scholar, look them up, see if they're practitioners in the industry, try to use that information to guide who you want to learn from, because you can actually go and see what content they're producing as members of the forensics community. Like, who wouldn't want to learn from Yogesh Khatri? Right? Like, who does Mac APT and contributes to iLeap, and right? Like, who wouldn't want to learn from Denise Ferbey over in Tennessee? Who would not want to learn? Like, there are so many people who would not want to learn from Ibrahim Bagili, who would, and you can use that to find the schools you want to go to. There's so many choices now. Those choices didn't exist when you and I were coming up. So that is
2005, yeah.
Now, there's another whole segment of the population. And that segment is people who are older, who are career switchers, etc. Mm-hmm. Maybe a master's program is the right path for you. And I teach in a master's program, and you're going to meet great people. Maybe it's not. Maybe going to some courses and getting certifications is the right path for you. But I don't care which one of these paths you choose. No matter, if you are a underrepresented minority in high school, cyber sleuths, Daryl Fife and Owen Casey's Cyber Sleuths program. Please look up Cyber Sleuth Lab. Find out if there's a camp near you and go to it. Digital forensics camp for women and other underrepresented minorities. Like, incredible. So there are great places to get started. But here's the thing. We are in a really weird field. Some people report that our figure for unemployment is 0%. There are tons of jobs.
Negative, yeah.
There are tons of jobs, right? Tons of jobs. The problem is, there's also tons of people who are finishing programs and getting their certifications and looking to get in. So you need to stand apart. And not only do you need to stand apart, a lot of these positions are written for people sometimes there are, but there's not enough positions actually written for junior level people. And this is kind of where I want to spend some focus and time now. How do we get people who are now getting this education, getting the certifications, learning on their own? And by the way, you can learn and study this on your own. There are now, do CTFs, please do CTFs. You learn so much from them. They will challenge you. There's so many CTFs we could talk about. There also a great CTF resource on about DFIR, Devin and Andrew and Mary Ellen's site. There are also job listings there. So I did a whole post about job hunting in DFIR that it's on the Magnet website. And if you just Google job hunting in DFIR, it'll be there. But more importantly, the point I'm getting to is sharing. What's going to set you apart, what's going to get you hired, and what's going to give you experience, credit, even if you've never worked a day in the field, is by researching your own devices, finding things, and sharing them. Yeah. Share your journey with the rest of us. Talk about what you're learning. There is so much changing that, trust me, you can find something without trying. You will find something to work on, to research, to passion about. Find it, work on it, share your learnings. Publish it. Phil Moore does a great post on This Week in Forensics. He has a little tab there on the top of it that's starting a blog. Start your blog. Get it out there. People who start blogs and share. Post. I know so many people who have gotten hired that way. And I mean, I've said it here when I've interviewed people who have had content when I was responsible as a hiring manager in a forensics lab. Instead of asking them random questions, I'd actually ask them about things they knew. It worked better for everyone. I asked them about the research they did. It will help you in the process. You're building experience. You're building your name. You're building your profile. You're going to build connections. Message Phil Moore on Twitter and give him your blog address. He will put it in This Week in Forensics. Get a Twitter account, tweet about it. He absolutely will. Go ahead and push it through DFIR review, and you're going to start to meet the people in the community. So there are so many places you can go. There are so many opportunities, but networking is actually still as important here as it is in any other industry. Yes. And I just... contribute, share, you will get recognized, you will get work. It
absolutely makes sense, especially because hearing you say that this week, every episode of Cash Up, and a lot of these questions have been asked, what advice do you have to somebody trying to get in? where do you go? What are your resources? What's your advice? What's your go-to? You've said a lot of the same things. Publish it. Don't be afraid. Get it out there. Network. It's a small field. So it's all the same advice, just from different viewpoints, but it's all the same advice. Publish your work. Do your own research. I mean,
rip your own phone, rip
Yes.
your own computer, set up a VM.
Start at home.
And you can do it all for free. You don't need fancy tools. Download Autopsy, download FTK Imager, get a hex editor, get a DB browser for SQLite, get in there and start playing.
And you can.
Wireshark, right? Like you can get in there. Magnet Acquire's free. Magnet RAM Capture's free. Belkasoft Acquisition Tool is free. Please don't fire me for talking about all of our competitors' tools. I'm joking. Magnet would never do that. I wouldn't work here if they did. So it was just a joke.
They play well with others. It's all good.
Play well with others. But seriously, download all the free tools and start playing. The good thing is the free tools don't do as much for you. So they actually force you to learn fundamentals that you don't have time to spend on when you're working real cases necessarily. Right. So you need things that do a lot more of the parsing for you. But when you're learning, it is incredible to jump in and deep dive and get down to the ones and zeros and start to understand it. Right. Yes. And it's funny because sometimes people are like, oh, you know, some of those questions on CTFs are a little obscure when they're things that are like, oh, this is encoded this way and that way. You know what? It's important to be able to recognize those. Start to learn your timestamps. Like being able to recognize timestamps. And if you play with your own data, you will download.
Because you're familiar with it.
Well, but so go to ArtX Double Black site and go ahead and download his 7-bit PDU tool and then try to see if you can manually do 7-bit PDU. Go ahead and download his timestamp decoder, which is fantastic, and try to look at the formats for different timestamps and understand them and figure them out, because it'll force you to look at those different timestamps. So there's just learn the fundamentals, play, publish, share. I am going to drop the link for that sharing post because I just think it's super duper critical. So I totally dropped that as Magnet.
That's okay. You are one of the voices of Magnet. We all expect it, and it's wonderful. And being the voice of Magnet and having all of this knowledge and being who you are, I'll ask one final question for today, and I think you have inspired so many people in DFIR. I mean, anybody who's watching is raising their hand saying, yeah, definitely. What or who inspires you?
Who inspires me? Oh my gosh. So in terms of, no, thank you for that question. That is amazing. I am inspired by so many people. I am inspired every time I look at people who have written these amazing materials. So that's everyone from Owen Casey to Brian Carrier to, to Paul Sanderson to John Baer. John Baer's mobile forensics book is amazing. Heather Mahalik and her practical mobile forensics. So all these people who have written great books, because man, that is hard and takes a lot of freaking work. Then I'm inspired by all of these people who are constantly doing amazing work in the field. I am more than motivated by people who take on the hard work. There is a lot of work in digital forensics that is not kind, that is emotionally tough. And I am so inspired by the people who take on the mentally tough, the technically not as challenging, but more mentally onerous work, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Not that it's not technically challenging. I'm saying that the bigger struggle with that work, those people inspire the hell out of me because they are doing what's needed for the mission. People who are doing forensics in the most austere of situations, which there are a slew of folks who are doing forensics in places you wouldn't imagine. I am inspired by those people who are sharing for the first time. Those people who they're getting their first bug and They're really sharing. I see James in there, and James is being too kind, but I would mention by name that James Duffy is out there and putting out content, even though he's new to the field. People like Alexis Brignoni, who gives more to this field and so much of his time. Not only is he working cases during the day, but he is sharing his research, he is blogging, he is writing tools, and he is giving a Python study group to
and
the
he's
community
first in line.
for free. He's first in line today, first one in the chat. People who, like Ladrina Sharon, who's pulling together all these resources along with Phil Moore to do. Everybody who's giving back and sharing inspires the crap out of me and motivates me. Everybody who I've mentioned today, of having had the chance to work with, everyone who I've ever collaborated, inspires the heck out of me. And everyone who I know who reaches out privately with questions or about weird things that they see on cases, and I get that pretty regularly, and I appreciate that, and please never stop. I want to try to help you. But a lot of times those people are doing the hard work that nobody ever knows about, and that work doesn't see the light of day, and they can't be public. But let me tell you, they are doing the things that are making a difference in people's safety, in people's lives, in nation safety, in protecting companies, on keeping people safe from their worst day. And I just want to say that I appreciate everyone, and I haven't met a person in this industry who didn't make me go, damn, wow, I wish I could do better and give more.
And that is the passion. What this right here, this is the passion. Sarah Conunchuk just said TED Talk today from Jess was wonderful. This is who you've said to me and so many of us that you want your job. Your job is to make your job is to bolster people to the point where your job is irrelevant. You've said that.
Yeah, I have said that. My job is to always work myself out of a job, because
yes.
there's no reason I should have my job if I can raise somebody else up to do what I'm doing, and then I can move somewhere else. Yeah, absolutely. That should be all of us, right? We should all. So unfortunately, there are these people in the world who think that knowledge is power the wrong way. They think knowledge is power by keeping it to themselves and then being irreplaceable.
Right.
That's not the way knowledge is power. Knowledge is power when you can raise others up, get them to a skill set that is better than you. They excel past you, and you move somewhere else. And you can't move. If you think knowledge is power because you hoard it, and you try to say, I have all of the institutional knowledge of this organization, and hence I am the person who is never going to be able to let go. What you just did was you stopped yourself from growing. You stopped yourself from being able to move somewhere else because you've locked yourself into that. You stopped your brain, your mental set, and you stopped the people you worked with from growing. You're no longer a leader, you're a manager. If you grow everyone and get other people who are smarter than you, because you always try to pick teams and work with people who are smarter than you to surpass you, then you can go somewhere else and then do the same thing again. We're surrounded by so many brilliant people. I just implore everyone, please, 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 always know that knowledge is power only if you share it. Knowledge is stifling if you keep it to yourself.
That's what makes you you. That's why we love you.
I love you're incredible, Lynn. I can't wait to flip the script and talk to you in a couple of weeks.
Well, for today, this was wonderful. Everybody who is here agrees. Everybody who has watched you, everybody in the field who knows you, loves you, respects you, thank you so much for opening up. Thank you for letting us get to know who you are. Thank you for catch up with you. Thank you. And thank you for this and this show, because you're humanizing the forensicators out there. So thank you for that too. Thank you. I just thank you all around. And do you have anything else that you would want to say to anybody watching today, tomorrow, or in the future that we haven't covered?
Never be afraid to reach out. Never be afraid to make a mistake. You're going to make mistakes, and just know that and do your best. And I really look forward to talking with more of you in future episodes and getting to know all of you.
Future episodes next week: Cindy Murphy, then Trey Amick, Elon Wright, also known as DFIR Diva. James Duffy is coming. Devin Ackerman. How do you say Ladrina Sharon?
Ladrina Sharon, I believe.
Sharon. Shelley Giesbrecht, Mitch Kaiser, Jad, our very own Jad is coming, Veronica Schmidt, Shauna Daly, Kevin Brightwell, Rob Duhart, Darlene Blay, Brian Moran. So many brilliant minds coming up. So, and I think you just told me today we're booked through the end of the year. So
we are.
Plenty of content. And on that, thank you so much for everything. And I hope I'm doing this right. But I think this is how we say goodbye, right?
Yeah, thank you, Lynn, for being such an amazing, gracious host. Thank you for the idea of flipping this today, and you've been sharing.
It was my honor and my pleasure.
Bye.
Bye.